Hi, it's Luna. Welcome to day 18 of 31 Days of Horror 2024, as done in 2025. Today we'll be looking at an oft-forgotten and unfairly rated little relic from 1992. It's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie. Let's talk about it. I'm so sorry for saying the movie like that. It's habit. Do you remember those cheesy old 90s trailers where it'd be like, this summer, the movie? I love them. I love the cheese. And that's what this movie has in plenty. Obviously, I'll run through quickly the fact that this is then something that comes before the absolute monolith, the cultural icon, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1997 on TV. It's still something that Joss Whedon came up with. This is maybe going to be a regurgitation of information that you already know, because a lot of people know that the movie exists vaguely, and that essentially Whedon kind of left the project, or was, I forget now, really unhappy with the project because it was something that we still see a lot of today when there's corporate meddling of someone higher up goes, no, I think it should be this. And then the vision is kind of not what it started as at all. So, despite the fact that the TV series mentions the events of the movie vaguely, what it specifically mentions is the original script that Whedon, derogatory, envisioned before the corporate meddling that turned it into the film that was made. So, of course, again, because the TV show is such a flippin' icon, it's got so many things to study even today for storytelling, for pacing, for all of these things. People love the show. Um, it's a common response to the movie to then look back at it and just feel like it's pointless, there's nothing to it. And I think, after having watched it myself, that that's unfair. I think it's too unfair. So I did watch the series before watching this movie and went into it knowing that it was the precursor, knowing the information that I've just said. But it was fine. It was fine. Like, I think that the records from the box office kind of record that as well. So I can't remember the numbers, don't make me. But the movie did double its profit, like it made double what it was to produce it. And so that's a win. That's not a movie being a box office bomb. And some of these reviews straight up say that, and it's wrong. It's incorrect. Um, like, it was also something that I found out that when it came out, Death Becomes Her was coming out the same week. Obviously, that was going to overwhelm it in sales. But yeah, so to get that out of the way, unfair criticism. It's then just quite a campy, fun, very 90s film. I think as well that from what I've seen that people are really harsh on a lot of the ideas and the dialogue here as well. There's still some flippin' great lines. I've written one down. Like a lot of that kind of like biting the sarcastic stuff that you hear in the TV show all the time. Um, One of them says, they had this look in their eyes, cold, animal. I think they were young Republicans. Movie still has a lot of that. Arguably too much when it comes to knowing what we know about the corporate meddling. It's one of the things that you notice in the movie posters, I think, because I looked those up as well. The one that was often used for, I mean, I could not find this poster without the coming soon underneath, and it's a shame. So I love it. It's on a football field at night. She's in her cheerleading costume because the concept obviously was meant to be very you know, flipped expectations. Like, how is this cheerleader, this valley girl ditz, meant to be like fighting the creatures of the night? And so the poster then just has like no head, just the cheerleading outfit. The pom poms almost look like the weapons, and then just like the stake beside it as well. And I love that one. I think that it gets across the tone of the movie very well. It's still got darker visuals, but then it seems like when it came out, a lot of that kind of visual was overwhelmed by the vivid colors. In this poster I'm referring to, which I'm obviously going to put on the screen, the text is neon, and then the cheerleading outfit itself is yellow. So like there's still like brighter tones there, but because of the actual like editing of the shot, it's still got that darkness to it. I think, as I understand it, a lot of the darkness was cut out of the final product, and as I say, you see this in the posters. A lot more brighter visuals, something that looks a lot more fun, silly, campy summer flick. And then, as I heard it, that's why then series one of Buffy and everything hence after was still then like a lot darker, because that's how much it was not great um in terms of those changes to the script. But yeah, I think that looking at it as like a relic of the 90s, because there's so much context around that, like again, it's fine, it's just fine. And the posters that come out after are then a lot more fun. The colors are vivid and neon and campy and very kind of like sour candy tones. And also, the other major thing with the advertising of this movie and the context of the 90s is Luke Perry. I I didn't really watch any 90210 ever, but that's obviously the one that made him famous. That's the one that started in the 90s. And regarding the production of this movie, it's another thing that I've got to mention contextually, because this whole thing was filmed within 5 weeks in order to accommodate Luke Perry's schedule around filming Beverly Hills 90210. God, it's such a mouthful. How did it get popular? Um, but for me, I didn't have the full context until I looked it up because of not watching this show that made him famous. What a flippin' powerful heartthrob he was. Another thing about that coming soon poster, Luke Perry is quite low on this listing, so it's interesting that the ones after really try to highlight him, get in that kind of audience and capitalize on the romance, his presence. One of the early trailers acts more like it's from his point of view. It My weeb is coming out when I say the early trailers for Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie reminds me of an anime. It's like from his over the top narration.
I just met this girl named Buffy. I'm Pike.
Pike isn't a name, it's a fish.
I liked her even though she seemed kind of flaky. But as it turns out, things started getting weird around here.
For me, my only familiarity with this actor was in CW's Riverdale, which unfortunately he was acting right up until the end, because he died during that. So what a strange like relationship I've had visually to this actor. But it's the 90s. He's a heartthrob. Clearly, I cannot understate the sex appeal of this man in this era, because he had a soul patch, for God's sake. Like, how is he still flipping pulling it off? I think that he has great charisma with Christy Swanson, who plays Buffy in this movie, um, which is remarkable because I don't think that I have a lot of criticism of Swanson per se. The fact is, the Buffy in this movie is very in her peak cheerleader era. She is vapid, she's inconsiderate. One of the early scenes has her talking very loudly in the cinema, and that's not my hero. That's not my Slayer. But I think that they do have a great chemistry. I think that the romance is something that I didn't expect to really root for going into it. Part of the feminist appeal of Buffy is the way that, it's an era of feminism. It's Spice Girls, girl power, but there is still that element of independent woman. I found that a lot of 90s movies that have girl power involved will have the romance aspect undermine it in some way because men still have to be strong and do saving. I would actually defend Buffy the Vampire Slayer 1992 and say that this doesn't happen so much. Luke Perry's raw flippin' charisma really makes him feel just a good boyfriend to her. It's a shame that it doesn't carry on almost. There, I said it. But I've said all this and not told the plot, just in case you've forgotten. As I say, it's so difficult because we, I think, as a society, just have the TV show in our heads. There is no other Buffy but Sarah Michelle Gellar. But, well, here goes. So, into every generation, a Slayer is born. Buffy is just a normal girl at a high school where she is a head cheerleader, has her whole cohort of other cheerleader besties. They go to the mall, they go shopping. She just wants to go far away, marry Christian Slater, and die. She's just a girl. Unfortunately, Destiny has other plans. She must use her cheerleading skills and her awakened powers as a slayer to hunt down the creatures of the night, the vampires, with help of Donald Sutherland. We may see him in a future movie in this series. Not sure. Reminder that there is a list if you would like to click the link and know the movies. If not, and you want to just wait as a surprise, I understand. Donald Sutherland as a watcher in this as well. I think that it's another aspect that people are too harsh on. Obviously, as I said, Sarah Michelle Gellar is people's only Buffy. Anthony Stewart Head is people's only Watcher, Giles. But Donald Sutherland does have this air around him that really makes him feel, to me, just a trustworthy source in the scenes he's in. And what I said earlier, that they clearly did a lot to meddle with the mood of the movie, this is one of the ways it shows. So, Donald Sutherland's Merrick, as is his name in the movie, he's killed. He dies. He's all, oh, I'm the Watcher. I cannot go and kill the vampires. It is your job. But in a lapse of faith with Buffy, she doesn't do that. So he goes off to try and do it himself. And he was right, he can't do it. So he's killed. And it's not the darkest scene ever, but it's definitely something that has a lot of weight to it. And this movie, as it came out in the end, can't really carry it, I feel. It causes a fair bit of tonal whiplash when there are so many smarmy comments, a lot of that bubblegum vibrancy and pep. It's got a lot more of the cheerleader comedy side of it than it does the darker vampire side to it. In this rendition of Buffy's story as well, it highlights way more this idea of her and her past lives. Christy Swanson plays her past lives as well, which I don't think I like that. It's fine. It's not very delved into deeply. It's kind of skimmed over. Um, so this is just a nitpick from me. But yes, after Merrick sadly perishes doing that thing he said he couldn't do, so he got to die saying, I told you so. Buffy's lapse of faith after this then leads her to be, well, I'm really out. I don't want anything to do with this. But again, Destiny has other plans, and so she does manage to banish all the vampires that invade her prom. And it's great. And her and Luke Perry, or I haven't even said his name in this film, Pike, they ride off on a motorbike into the sunset. And there was sequel bait to this as well, because I haven't even talked about the villains. The unfortunate thing is, for me, they don't really shine. There's just, I don't know, I can't remember the actors for the villains. There's like a head vampire, and mostly we see his lackey and other exciting vampires, such as Vampire, credited as Seth Green, who would of course return in the show as Willow's boyfriend. But in this he is just Vampire. And another fun cameo, you probably heard, Ben Affleck. Yeah, this baby boy at the big game, he turns into Batman one day. This is wild. This is more wild than Willem Dafoe at the phone booth in The Hunger. The head vampire has some kind of gimmick where, as most vampires do, he likes his classical music. He's playing a violin. There is an interesting kind of romance tinge on it as well. Although I say interesting in the polite British way, where someone shows you something absolutely horrendous and you go, oh, that's interesting. I don't think that it works for this. It's another one of the messier aspects of the movie where you can just tell that it went through a million and one changes during production. It's definitely how it feels to me with that information to hand as well. Who knows? Maybe it was part of the original vision that it would also be a predatory romance. This is then the era of the vampire renaissance as well. I think that it's forgotten a lot because I don't know, maybe the context just don't line up for people in the same way, but 90s was quite a vampire renaissance. We had Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles with the one movie that I like Tom Cruise in, Interview with the Vampire, and we had Coppola's Dracula, I think. So yeah, I can see that there maybe was an original vision to have the head vampire be more predatory towards Buffy and more like, ooh, dark romance, but acknowledged as icky and not an attractive thing. I don't think there was as much attention on the head vampire as there was on his sidekick, who is then a very cool interpretation of a vampire visually, I'd say. He's got that more rock and roll flippin' pirate who maybe plays an electric guitar thing going on. I like his gold fang, and I would say that he does light up the scenes he's in. I feel mean that I said the villains are quite forgettable because they're not the worst thing in the world in the scenes that they're in, but in comparison to the way that I think that the romance between Swanson and Perry was like poppin', and then Donald Sutherland and his presence, or even just her other friends. I do like the mall scene. It really just, it's such a flippin' 90s pastiche. But yeah, yeah. It really is the more normy parts of the movie that then kind of shine. There is that easy humor, that the jokes land, that the visuals are great. And of course, because it's the 90s, not a single one of these teenagers looks under 20. It's a good amalgamation of tracks they've put together for the soundtrack throughout this movie as well. It's a bunch of those kind of pop songs, I don't know, music genres that shows again, but another thing that I would say carried through to the Buffy show is then a lot of this attention paid to different music acts and upcoming bands. I like that aspect as well. A lot of this movie really is just fine, and just fine's okay. I'm almost cross with the fandom for just unfairly chucking rotten tomatoes at this movie. It's just fine. Obviously, it's unfortunate that it's just fine. No wonder it hasn't exactly stood the test of time, and as I've spent this entire review saying, it really does show, as soon as you're aware how many problems there were with production, the fact that they filmed it to accommodate Perry's schedule, you know, it was all in 5 weeks, and just the vision changing as much as it did, those tonal whiplash moments, they really, really show. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. The one scene where I think that the whole vampire action flick with a Valley Girl cheerleader really shines is the prom scene with all the vampires at the end. You know, we got this this good line of the whole, "Oh, well, they can't be invited in, right?" It's like, "Oh, I invited all these people." It's so silly, and I feel, God forbid, Cinema Sins do a ding for this, that then it's just comedic timing. There's this flipping guy going around like you're all getting detention, and I don't know, I wouldn't count this part as part of the tonal whiplash for jokes. I think that it takes itself very unseriously in these moments, and that if you're willing to go along with that, then that's awesome. I mean, she makes a flipping makeshift hairspray flamethrower for this prom scene. They drive off on a motorbike into the sunset. It's still got a lot of these elements that I think if you're just willing to, you know, get behind the sheer 90s-ness of it all, Luke Perry's soul patch, um, you'll still have a fun enough time. It sucks that it won't be one to remember. I feel this way about a couple of movies that have been unfairly dunked on, and you watch it and you come away going, it's just fine. For one last time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1992, it's just fine. 3 stars. And to be honest, it only got that extra half a star because everyone else is so mean to it. Thank you for watching my silly little review. If you like this, you should check out the rest of the 31 Days of Horror. I hope that you'll join me next time for a classic, one that will inspire a whole generation of other movies like it and still not hit the mark. See you then.